first that I can see all the wonderful
We
people.
are
that
live.
Our Wine Wednesday. There we go.
So many wonderful people.
So many wonderful people.
So many wonderful people. Cannot even. Where's... Oh, God. Why does my face... Remember last week when... Was that last week when you did something? It was on mine, and it was like my face. It was all my face on the screen.
Oh, really?
It just did it again.
Huh.
That's scary.
It focuses on you first. Hi, Tony.
Hey, Christopher Cox. What you doing?
Are you logged in?
I am logged in. I just need to turn down my volume. See, today I will be able to see if anyone questions or comments.
Nice.
And we can say hi to Randy and Noah Brader, who's watching.
Wow.
If anybody wants to say hi, I'm all excited because I know who's watching now.
Yes.
Woohoo. So anyway.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Wait.
So you'll probably notice the wine is a little light in color today.
It's a new blend of white wine.
It's a Blanc.
Yes.
Very Blanc. Blanc-ish.
Yes. So, but today we're going to talk about
this isn't good.
agency, which I know sounds like so super exciting, right? You're all like, yes, I've been waiting.
Cannot wait for a discussion on agency.
I've been waiting on this Wine Wednesday.
Well,
thank goodness they finally.
But quite frankly, it's necessary.
Yeah.
And it's one of these topics that we...
We're making the division of real estate.
See,
really
look at that.
Right now.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this week I was messaging with someone via Facebook who, whatever, they were wondering if anyone had interest in a house that they were possibly going to sell. So, immediately 102 real estate agents are on there. I'll PM you. Well, yeah, I joined in. But the question I had been presented was, they are buying a home. Do they have to use the same agent to sell their home? They had no idea. So there's some things that are funky with real estate that I think
people don't understand.
People just don't know. And that's fine, and that's good, because why would you know that? Unless you're in the business or have done something with it. So,
and unless you're savvy, especially with agency, you can really weaken your negotiating position when you're buying or selling a home.
Right. So, like always, we at 43 Homes are a fan of education. That's why we do this every week. And,
not just for the wine.
Well, it's a little bit for the wine on my end. Drinking wine on a Wednesday afternoon is always a good thing, for goodness sake. Especially this Blanc blend. It's,
straight,
it is.
Straight,
it is.
It has a spring crispness to
it. It's just
purifying.
Wonderful. Hey, Dennis. So anyway, we I got off track. I don't know. I lost my thought.
So, let's just dive in directly with that question.
All right.
That you got. So, do you have to use the same agent if you're buying and selling?
No.
Survey says
no.
No.
Ultimately, these things are all your choice. You're not tied to or obligated to anyone.
Yep. Right.
You choose who you work with, and anybody who tries to force you otherwise, that's not the best way to go about it.
No. Right.
But before we go a little bit deeper, should we talk about the difference between a customer and a client?
Yes.
Because I think that really becomes the dividing factor in this.
Yes. I think that's
Sure.
So, Jenny, am I your customer or am I your client right now?
You're my BFF. You're neither. One of them.
Hey, Greg Blousy.
Well, so is it, as in, what is the question?
So like right now,
like we're just talking?
Yeah, we're talking.
Like
I walk
brand
into your
new?
house. Yeah, brand new. Am I your customer or your client?
You'd be my customer.
Everybody can be my
Although in
customer.
my head, I might be thinking client.
Yeah.
Well, that's my client.
Right.
No, there's a difference. And there's a lot of customers out there.
Right.
Yeah.
In Ohio, there's no presumption of agency. So just because you and I are conversing about a transaction or a property does not mean that we are in a representative relationship where I'm not necessarily representing you. And the only way I'm representing you is if we have entered into an agreement as such. So be aware when you walk into an open house and you decide you want to write an offer, and that agent that's listing the house is writing the offer, that agent is representing the seller, not you. There are instances of dual agency, and we can talk about that. But primarily, if you walk into a situation, someone writes an offer for you that is not specifically designated in a buyer brokerage agreement, that person's representing the other party.
So, as our broker, what responsibilities do we have that are different between a client and a customer?
Well, our responsibility is to a customer is to treat them honestly and fairly. We have no fiduciary responsibility to a customer. Our fiduciary responsibility lies with your client, which is the one that you've signed some sort of agreement with, a listing agreement usually in this situations.
So should we just go down our agency form that we provide all of our potential customers who then become clients for them to sign?
Yeah,
So,
that's why it's there.
yeah.
So, and maybe it seems redundant to say, there are different forms of agency. You've got seller agency, buyer agency, dual agency.
Yeah.
And if I was someone who wanted to sell my house, what would that be?
You would be looking for a seller's agent or someone to enter into that fiduciary relationship with who would help you sell your home. You would become their client.
And what are my responsibilities in that case?
As the agent? You have
Are there any? Are there? Do I have to do anything?
Once you're in that, you have confidentiality. You have to follow their lawful instructions. You still have to be honest and fair with other people in the transaction. But, if I'm selling your house and you're my client and you say, I can go as low as $210,000, well, I can't tell anybody that unless you instruct me to. Or if you say, you know what, I won't consider anything below $750, I can't tell people that unless you tell me to, because we have that layer of confidentiality.
Well, in any agency representation, our duty is often referred to by the acronym ODCAR, which means obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, and reasonable care. So
that is quite an acronym.
It is.
You've never heard that?
Yes.
So that is
I have. Duh. I mean, come on.
That is our duty to anyone we're representing as a client. So I think maybe we should talk about what those things mean. Obedience. TJ mentioned following lawful orders. As from your client. If you tell us, to do this, or you tell us to do that, as long as it's not against the law, that is part of our responsibility.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Loyalty. What's that mean?
It means that we're going to put your interests as our client above our own.
Yes.
And above everyone else's.
Yes.
You become our first priority, as it should be.
Right. In disclosure, we're going to disclose to you any interests that we have that affect your interest in the transaction. So, there are situations where a brokerage owns the title company, or they have some sort of relationship with the lender. It is up to us to disclose those things that are relevant to your transaction or to our relationship.
Right.
Confidentiality, that one's obvious. This is, I think, the biggest thing we owe people is that as party to this, as party to this, we learn a lot about you.
Yes.
Financial information, why you're buying or selling, all kinds of things that, and this is the one thing that never ends. So after the transaction closes, we still owe you the duty of never disclosing that stuff unless you tell us we can do otherwise.
Absolutely.
Like a vault.
Yes.
Lock it.
So accounting. The next one's a zip.
Zip it.
The next one's accountability, which by all intents and purposes, for instance, in property management, if we have your money that we're holding in a trust account or even in a buying and selling agreement, we have to account for that money. We have to give it back or, disperse it as per the contract. So that's part of our accountability. And then old car.
Yeah, this
Reasonable
I need
care.
this written
Reasonable
down.
care.
I know what we're
This
talking
is taking
about.
you back to real estate school
See,
days.
the difference is when you learn it, you learn the acronym, but then it becomes second nature. So you just
These are all things we just do.
right. These are
We
things
don't
you just
need
do.
no stinking acronym.
That's right. And the last one's reasonable care. Is
Right.
that we're
Okay.
going to exercise, our best ability to ensure that we're taking care of your best interests. So
Which we do.
Yes.
Yes.
So that is our full responsibility, whether you're buyer or seller, whatever agency part of this is that we are.
Yes.
So I side railed us a little bit, but we talk about sellers.
Yeah. So now I want to buy a house.
So
I
we the
call you.
buyers.
You're going to enter into a buyer broker agreement with us, which lays out both of our sides, and then you become my client, not my customer. That's that one little signature that makes the difference between client and customer, and you want to do that because you want to make sure that we're doing all the things that we should. So my screen just flashed.
It does. It's been.
No, I think they're next. No, they're next door.
Can't come in during on Wednesday.
That's right. Don't they know better? Don't they
we
know what's
need
going
our
on?
Kevin.
giant on-air sign.
Right.
No, so as your buyer client. Wait, are you buying or am I buying?
I'm buying.
You're buying. You're buying.
I'm buying. I'm buying.
How much are you going to spend?
I'm buying $1 million house.
You're buying
in
$1 million
Dublin that I
house?
saw on Wayne Henry's Facebook
So
page.
the $6 million?
The
Oh,
$6
$6
million.
million. It's $6 million.
Wait,
That's I up my
Are you new cash?
Yeah, I got it.
So somebody was on earlier was telling me about the guy that owns that house. Evidently, he started a company here in Columbus that sold to. I'd have to go back and look, but it sold to like a big company. So the guy was one to do very well for himself, but is one that really never lost himself in his success. So it was actually pretty.
Oh, that's
Pretty
Kind of a
cool.
nice story.
So, yeah.
It was a beautiful house too.
It is-
So
it is.
I
Could
would-
use a little updates,
But
can't they all?
so one big thing that I owe you within all that, to put it into a practical example, as your agent, is I'm not going to call the other agent and tell them how much you can afford to pay on a house.
Right.
So, Jenny, I'm not going to tell them that you're actually approved up to $7 million for that house. No,
Because I am.
because that wouldn't be responsible, and that's a
Right.
confidentiality
Right.
issue.
Right.
There we are. The seeing the old car.
Yes, and on the other side of that, as the seller's agent, we're not going to tell the buyer that you'd be willing to take $5 million for the house
Right.
because that's just not how we roll.
Unless one or the other side instructs the other person to.
Right. Which that is always because we're representing you. If you give us permission to do that, we then can.
And I think it's always best to do that stuff in some form of writing, text
Yes.
message or an email.
Protects everybody.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think wires get crossed in the form of verbal communication.
Sure.
That, oh, well, I thought you meant this.
Right.
Mhm.
So when it comes to big disclosure things like that, let's put it in some form of writing so we can't accidentally do something that you really didn't want us to do.
Right.
Right.
So then we get into the tricky topic of you're holding an open house.
Mm-hmm.
I come in as a buyer.
Mhm.
I don't have anyone helping me, but oh my
Am
gosh,
holding
I
man's
love
house open?
it's the $6 million
That's
house.
$6 million house.
Yeah, and I want to buy it. Oh my gosh. So can we write an offer? Will you help
Absolutely.
us?
Absolutely. I'll
What
help you.
happens then?
Well, I right now am the seller's agent.
Mm-hmm.
So anything you tell me, I tell people it's sort of like the Miranda rights. Anything you say can and will be used against you because you're my customer. So if
Right.
you tell me, oh my God, I love this house. I'll pay anything in the world for it. Money's no issue. I'm going to pay cash, but I only want to offer $4 million. So then I'm going to go to Wayne, who's the
Who's the
owner.
seller.
Wayne's our seller. And I'm going to say, hey, Wayne, we've got this person over here. She said Monday's no object. She loves the house. She has to have it. She's been wanting it her entire life. But she only wants to offer you $4 million. And Wayne is going to be like,
No.
But if you were my client, if you had brought in your own agent or you hadn't disclosed that stuff to me, then Wayne wouldn't know the money's no object and he may consider your offer.
So I think the origination generally for dual agency is, I've been showing you houses, I'm the agent, I've been showing you houses, and we have a buyer broker agreement, so I'm technically already your client,
Mm-hmm.
or you are my client. And then, I signed this $6 million listing, up. So now I signed up, I'm the agent because I signed a listing agreement with the seller.
Mm-hmm.
So I already have that agreement. And then I found a buyer
Mm-hmm.
and we signed an agreement. I'm going to find you a home. But when I list this home, I realize, oh, that's perfect for this buyer. So I take that buyer to that home, and then now this buyer wants to write an offer on the house I have listed. So then we have what's called dual agency, right? I think if you walk into an open house and you want to write an offer, there really shouldn't become an agency relationship in that manner.
Well, right. So, okay.
Because a lot of
Yeah.
people think that there's dual agency at that point, which is why we went through that example.
Exactly. So here, dual agency gets a little tricky. And I'd be curious of any agents watching
Mm-hmm.
who does it. Because I will tell you that as an agent, if you have me as your agent, I won't. I would refer you.
And I did that once.
Yeah, because I have done it before and I've done it successfully, but truly, in my opinion, I just don't feel like, it's hard to represent both sides, and
It's impossible. Yeah.
it kind of is very tricky. Yes, and so
Let's talk specifically about, okay, what does dual agency mean?
yes,
Okay, so dual agency means, going back to the scenario where I'm already your client or I'm already your agent and then I'm already the buyer's agent. We're going to write this offer. Dual agent means I am now duly representing both parties.
Right.
I am going to be the buyer's agent and I'm going to be the seller's
Right.
agent. Ultimately, what that means is that I can no longer advise you. I can provide you information to make decisions.
Mhm.
So for the buyer, I can say, here are all the comps that have sold comparable to this house over here.
Mhm.
And so then it's up to you to say, I'm going to offer this amount. I want possession this date, all other terms of the contract. I can't, if you ask me, what do you think about the price? I can't tell you I think the house is worth X. I can only show you the information and it is up to you. But I'm of the opinion that that's not a fair
right,
representation.
exactly.
Absolutely. I agree.
And that's where it gets tricky because you can't. And then, the seller, you're representing the seller too, and you will know where they would be willing to negotiate a bit on price.
Mm-hmm.
And the buyer may think that you'll be willing to give up that information, and you can't.
Because you know too much. I mean, you
But
know about
on the same
buyer's
side, the seller too
Right.
might think, oh, well, they could tell me what is happening, what the buyer's willing to give.
Well,
And
how much is that buyer qualified
no,
for?
yeah, we can. There's not happening.
And so I had this instance happen when I actually started with an open house. I had a buyer come, actually it called off the sign, it wasn't an open house. And he said to me specifically, I want you to be a dual agent. So it was a pretty savvy buyer, first of all. I want you to be a dual agent so I can get a better price on this house. And what I want is that you'll represent me for only 1%. So basically I had a 6% listing agreement.
Mhm.
And he was savvy in that he asked, I want you to be the dual agent.
Mhm.
You reduce your commission 2%. And basically I can get a better price
Okay.
because you're reducing your commission by 2% of whatever the purchase
Mhm.
price was. So then he could reduce his offer by 2% because I was getting paid less.
Mhm.
Some agents may go for that, some will not.
Mhm.
In this instance, I ended up doing it, but then we started getting into this.
Right.
What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And to be fair to all parties, I just said to him, look, I've got another agent in my office that's going to take this over for you right now. I said, because we're getting into areas where I cannot answer your questions
Yeah.
and I don't feel good about it. So I'd rather have someone that's going to help you. And I'm not going to jeopardize my relationship with my seller. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is that I don't know how. I mean, it's fully legal in the state of Ohio.
Yes.
As long as that is within. So as a brokerage, we have to have a policy on agency relationships.
Right. Of course.
And most brokerages, I think, have it in their policy that you can do this. Some probably don't. But it is within our policy and that we can do it. However, you agents must use extreme care, not just reasonable care.
Right.
And both sides have to agree to allow dual
And
agency.
that's the thing
Is it-
too. As the
The
seller
disclosure
or the
part.
buyer, you can tell your agent that you don't want that to happen, and they have to respect that and do that
Yes.
because you're
It
their
is,
client.
as much as we're talking about it, is uncommon.
It is uncommon. I mean, I just don't know that really. So it leads into also that there are brokerages that do only represent buyers or only represent sellers as
Right.
well. So that's I know when I was taking real estate classes, one of the teachers was worked for a brokerage that only did buyers. I don't know that I've run into that though. Other than that, have you?
I can think of a couple. I know more that do. I can think of more that do just buyer representation. I can't really think of anyone that does.
I can think of agents, but I can't think of any agencies.
Like one in particular in my mind stands out, but I mean that in those instances, like if you were saying where the woman asked if you would represent, if the same agent will represent on both sides, if it's in that agency's policy that they only represent buyers, then when you go to sell your house, you will have to find someone else.
Right, exactly. So there's just some tricky gray, not gray. It's black and white in our career choices, what you do and what you don't. But I think for the consumer, it can seem a little gray. There's some things that you just don't know, and there's things that you know. So in that instance, that question being raised again. No, you don't have to use the agent that's writing your offer to sell your house. You have the option to pick whomever you would like to have represent you for that. Now, with that being said, would it make it awkward? Maybe. I mean, it depends on the agent. They might be like, well, why didn't you want me to do that? But, it's well within your rights to make that choice. You need to pick who's working for
But
you.
if I'm coming to you and we're sitting down for a meeting about you buying a house, if you have a house now, I'm going to try and get that listing at the same time.
Right.
And, I know that you asked them, did you sign an agreement already with that agent, because we're not allowed to poach other agents' clients.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And nor would I want to. I don't work that way.
No, there's not.
And I think the biggest thing and why you would choose one to do both is this is a very tricky scenario as far as timing is concerned when you're buying and you're selling, especially in this market. Trying to time this, and also especially if you are dependent upon the house you're selling to sell before you buy, because you've got to time these things.
It is a dance.
And so you've got to get the buyer to agree to close, in conjunction with when you're going to close on the house you sell. So it can be very tricky, and having, it's kind of the cooks in the kitchen, analogy. Getting too many cooks in that kitchen can help, make that a little bit more difficult.
And there's a lot of cooks anyway in the kitchen. Yeah. There's a lot of spokes in the wheel happening during these transactions anyway. So, to add some more layers in there is sometimes,
And so ultimately, I think the big question that comes up is, I get a lot more from buyers because it's the first time they've been through this, is how much do I pay you? That will depend on your brokerage, and maybe even sometimes the agent that you work with, because some brokerages have a fee that you will be charged. We don't have that here, which is another reason to use us. So generally, commission is covered on the seller side, unless you sign a buyer broker agreement that the agent will get paid X percent in commission, and the seller says I'm only paying, X minus whatever it is they're going to pay. So generally, you don't, as a buyer, you don't pay. The seller's paying.
Right.
It's built into the price, I guess, if you will. So, so that's a question I think that's common. How much am I going to have to pay you? And then buyers are generally relieved, when they hear, oh, good, the seller's paying. So.
Yeah.
And I think that when we sit down and meet with you, we always give you the Consumer's Guide to Agency, which really spells out, I think, as simplistically as possible, these types of relationships. But if you have questions as you're reading it, you should ask us. And if you have further questions, you can always talk to an attorney, which is what I think we're going to tell you to do with anything that you sign. If you're still confused or uncomfortable with the answers that you're getting or have further questions, you can always talk to an attorney. And I mean, it's pretty easy to find a real estate attorney, or we can provide referrals for you.
Absolutely.
Because I think in this area, in all areas when you're dealing with legal issues, if you're looking for an attorney, you want one that knows this area of the law. You don't there aren't a lot of attorneys that can cover everything.
Yeah, I've had people where my buddy's a criminal attorney. Okay. It's kind of like going to a doctor, when you've got a problem with your ear, and you go to a foot doctor. It's like, while they may understand general concepts, they don't understand the
There's
nuances.
a difference. We all have specialties, and you want someone who specializes
Yes.
in that type of law.
But probably not one of the more funny topics or exciting topics that we've covered, but still I think probably one of the more important. There's
always importance in even the minutia topics.
Absolutely.
There's just...
Absolutely.
I'm a fan of education. I'm a fan of people knowing the ins and outs of this industry, because I just don't think they do. And you watch HGTV, they're not giving it to you. You don't know. You're not an agent. You're not an attorney. You're not, but you feel like one, and you can Google too. It's like,
in this day and age, Google,
the information's there, but
people
people are so they just don't have the understanding of how it actually works. It's not
right. And we're here to help.
Yes.
Always. Especially 43 Homes.
Yes.
We love help. We're helpers.
We are.
We love being helpers.
We're your little real estate elves.
Yes.
So, have we covered it all?
I think we have.
Yeah.
Right.
We can close this down.
Yeah.
Donezo. Done.
Well,
yeah.
I think it's time to sign off.
Sign off, peeps.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Cheers, Jenny.
Highly recommend the Blanc.
Yes.
Real more potent wine.
The spring water best.
See ya.
Cheers.